Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Stronger Than Steel podcast, Season 6, episode, we'll call it either 37 or 38, depending on when Austin gets his episode posted, right around the same time I'm recording, on Thursday, November 18th. The Pittsburgh Steelers having tied the Detroit Lions by a final score of 16-16 in one of the more disappointing and frustrating displays of football in recent memory from the Pittsburgh Steelers, in a game that the Steelers really, on paper, should have been able to handle. And even with Mason Rudolph in for Ben Roethlisberger, you'd feel pretty good about the Steelers' chances to win this game. But repeated mistakes, turnovers, inefficient offense in key situations, very poor run defense, and an inability to create explosive plays, just a combination of a bunch of different things, led to the Pittsburgh Steelers tying the Detroit Lions. And this team should really consider themselves lucky to have been able to tie the Lions, given all the things that went against them in this game in terms of the typical numbers you like to look at for determining a winner and a loser, like turnovers. Turnovers was a 3-0 decisive victory for the Lions, and in terms of explosive plays, I mean, that's a little more, I guess, that's a little more up for debate. The Steelers had, I want to say, 2 explosive plays. 3 if you want to talk about a potential defensive pass interference that ended up being a 29-yard penalty. But otherwise, there was a 20-yard pass to Deontay Johnson, a 26-yard run by Mason Rudolph, and there was also a 36-yard pass to Deontay Johnson in overtime that was ultimately fumbled. So, technically speaking, there's only 2, because the pass interference doesn't count in the stat book, and the play to Deontay Johnson where he fumbled doesn't count because he turned it over. So I'm willing to call it 3 in that instance, but at the end of the day, just not enough explosive plays for this offense once again. And then defensively, the Steelers gave up 1, 2, 3, 4. They gave up 5 explosive plays if you include the punt return, the 48-yard punt return that the Lions had early on in the second quarter. So if you even out the Steelers negated, if you will, and adding in the defensive pass interference, and on the other side you have the Lions at 5, that means the Steelers were -2 in terms of overall explosive plays, and add into the fact that Godwin Igwebuike's run was a double explosive play. That means that the Steelers, if you want to be technical, were a 6-3 differential there in the explosive play department. So they were getting doubled up in explosive plays, if you want to be technical, and they also managed to be 0 for 3 in the turnover department. So they were combined -6 in the talk stat, if you go by my definition. Being -2 in the talk stat means you only have a 20% chance of winning the game. If you go by my definition, the Steelers were -6 and managed to not lose this game. They somehow tied. So I just wanted to focus in on that as one of the 3 main reasons that this team was unable to come away with the win. The first quarter for this team was very good. I know they only had a 7-point lead, but the opening drive was great, and defensively, the Rams had 3 drives, none of which lasted more than 4 plays, and they just were unable to move the ball. They had not a single first down in the first quarter, and ultimately the Steelers were just unable to take advantage of the good start by the defense. They did get the opening drive touchdown, 4th of the year, which was really nice, which we haven't seen from this team very often. So the fact that they've done it 4 games this season is quite impressive. But 2 other drives in the first quarter, unable to gain first downs in succession. The second drive of the game resulted in a second down play that lost 3 yards due to a kind of jammed up play where Ray McLeod caught a touch pass that Najee Harris kind of slammed into him when he was running his fake. And also Zach Gentry got blown up into the backfield. So that play killed the second drive, and then the third drive was Mason Rudolph's poor decision and or really just a poor throw that was intercepted in Detroit territory by Julian Okwara on a play that he really didn't have to make in that sense. That was just a simple check down, and it was one of the few passes that Rudolph missed on the day, who I thought played fine. I thought he played well enough given the situation and given where this quarterback play for this team has been this year. I'd consider it just a step below where Ben has played this year. But he didn't make enough plays, and this interception was one of 2 pretty rough plays that he made on the day, and this is one he certainly would have wanted to have had back. Elsewhere, the second thing I wanted to focus on was the red zone offense for this team. Again, they started off the game perfectly with a nice drive that culminated with a touchdown from Mason Rudolph to his former college teammate James Washington, as we all know. The other 2 times in the red zone, not quite as fortunate. A mid-second quarter drive, a very nice drive for the Steelers, starting from their 20-yard line after a penalty, getting all the way down to the Detroit 7-yard line. But a play where Dan Moore gets called for holding, where Najee Harris bounces it outside and struts into the end zone. A play that I don't necessarily agree with being called holding. I mean, he was grabbing the defender inside the pads, which is usually okay. But I suppose the way that Harris bounced it outside made it difficult for Moore to hold his block. And whenever you are showing your hands gripping a defensive player like that, I suppose you're risking being called for that penalty. Though I don't agree with it, I have seen that called before. So that was just a brutal drive-killing penalty, one that you really hate to see, because the Steelers' offense was unable to get back into scoring position and had to settle for a 20-yard field goal, which I thought was the right decision at the time because the Steelers needed points. And given that they were the favorite, I thought it made more sense to go ahead 10-7, put more pressure on the Lions. So that was more so just an unfortunate situation than anything else. But if that penalty doesn't get called, the Steelers come away with 7 points instead of 3. And then the final red zone drive was the one where Mason Rudolph skipped the ball at the feet of Ray McLeod, which was obviously another frustrating play, where McLeod was open and it looked like Rudolph just missed him, or there was some sort of miscommunication. I don't know exactly who the blame falls on, but that's a play that you really need to make because, again, you talk about the interception by Rudolph in Detroit territory, you talk about Dan Moore's holding call, or this pass to a wide-open Ray McLeod in the end zone that was skipped short of him. If any of those 3 plays change, the Steelers will likely win this game. And not being able to come up with that. So a 23-yard field goal and a 20-yard field goal are hard to stomach when the Steelers were able to get that far down the field, especially when considering this is the worst red zone defense in the league. The Steelers needed to do better in terms of punctuating their red zone possessions, and they did a great job starting, but they were unable to capitalize throughout the rest of the course of the game. And number 3, wanted to focus on the poor run defense that the Steelers had in this one. So we're big proponents of run success rate over yards per carry, but this is an interesting game where run success doesn't necessarily tell the whole story in this one, simply because the Lions' successful runs were such big plays it kind of offset the fact that they didn't really run successfully for a good portion of the game. I took down tallies of the running back attempts by the Detroit Lions, including a fullback run in this game. In the first quarter, fourth quarter, and in overtime, the Lions never had a run success rate in a single frame higher than 33%. 2 for 6 in the first quarter, 3 of 9 in the fourth quarter, and 1 of 5 in the fourth quarter. But the key was the second and third quarter, where the Lions were 7 of 10 on successful runs in the second quarter, and were 4 of 9 in the third quarter. So a total of 11 for 19, so certainly over 50% there. And a lot of those runs were big runs, 42-yard touchdown run, 21-yard run, 28-yard touchdown run. And in some cases, guys weren't getting touched for most of their way down the field, but there were also several plays like Jamar Jefferson's 28-yard touchdown run, a play where both of the Steelers linebackers were in improper lanes, getting washed out of the play, and Jamar Jefferson was just able to run free into the secondary. DeAndre Swift had a long run in this game. And Godwin Igwebuike's 42-yard run, a guy that was a safety when Austin looked at him pre-draft several years ago, a guy that made this defense look silly. Horrible tackling attempts by Devin Bush and Minka Fitzpatrick in this one. So a combination of just not improper run fits and poor tackling, and really just the second and third quarter, even though a high success rate in just 2 quarters as opposed to 2 other quarters and an overtime isn't enough to make a difference. The fact of the matter is the Steelers' offense shot itself in the foot too many times for this team to allow more than 16 points, number one. And number two, they did such a great amount of damage on those explosive runs that it just didn't matter. There's a nice post from Steelers Depot talking about the Lions' 13 personnel with 1 running back and 3 tight ends. How they ran had 15 running plays on those out of that formation or personnel package, and they gained something like 170 of their 229 rushing yards in that situation. So just the Steelers were able to adjust late in the game, but by the time they had, the damage was done. And what makes that all the more frustrating is just the fact that Jared Goff and the Lions' passing offense was practically non-existent. I mean, they had a 30-yard pass in this game. I think it was the first play of overtime. And besides that, there wasn't anything else going on the rest of the game. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown had that 30-yarder, and he had like a 19-yarder. But besides that, that was essentially their entire passing game. 14 completions for 114 yards, and you could tell Goff was laboring in this one with a back or oblique injury, and the pass defense just didn't have to work, and it didn't matter because the Lions were never in a situation where they were out of this game and they could just keep running the ball. So all of that, and then the cherry on top of the crap sandwich were the fumbles by Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth in overtime. 2 situations where the Steelers would have possibly been able to kick a field goal, or potentially would have had the chance to kick a field goal around as time was expiring in Pat Freiermuth's case, and in the former situation, Deontay Johnson possibly line up for a more favorable field goal situation. So all sorts of bad from this team. Lots of sloppy play, and just, in some ways you wish that this game could have happened against another team where you would have gotten blown out and would have lost this game in frustrating fashion, just because a game against the winless Lions was a perfect opportunity to take first place in the AFC North, get yourself into the thick of things with 8 games left, where you only have to go 500 to have a 10-win season and likely make it into the playoffs. And now you probably have to have a winning record over your final 8 games against difficult opponents to be able to make the playoffs. And where this team sits right now, I'm very skeptical that they're going to be able to win more than 2 or 3 games the rest of the way. And I don't want to be overreactionary to it, but when you have a team that is struggling to make splash plays on offense, struggling to give up splash plays on defense, not turning the ball over on defense, and is not taking advantage of their red zone offense, you're going to have a lot of issues. And the Steelers, again, should consider themselves lucky to have been able to play to a tie with the Lions. But they are not playing winning formula. They do not have a winning formula of football being played right now. And if they're not careful and they don't improve soon, the big boys are coming to town. They're coming to the playground this week with the Los Angeles Chargers, and it's going to keep going through the rest of the season. So that's all for today's episode of the Stronger Than Steel podcast with John Keir. Again, just a short and sweet episode talking about the three biggest reasons the Steelers, I wanted to say tied the Lions. It felt like a loss. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website where we have our new episodes posted at anchor.fm/strongerthansteel. That's our new home for the podcast. And we're also posting our episodes on YouTube under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast, as always. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. We'll be back on Saturday talking Steelers and Chargers. Thanks again.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.